All right, so I said the car was broken in the last video, guys, and why don't we go for a ride and I'll show you exactly what's going on. I'm getting, just like the video description said, that dreaded P2767 speed sensor fault, which can only mean one thing: a bad connector plate, conductor plate. Alrighty, let's go for a little drive, guys, and I'll show you exactly what it means to have a faulty connector plate. If you've never experienced it before, this is what you're looking for. So it pulls out just fine. I don't have any codes present right now, and the car's working just like it should. So I'm going to drive up the street here. Everything's pretty warm. I don't know what my trans temps are, only because, to be quite honest with you, I forgot how to get into my Z Automotive. This car's been sitting a while. All right. So everything's working just fine, but right there, it just happened. I don't know if you guys saw it. Just that little jerk there. And now the car, I guarantee you, is in limp mode. It's not throwing a code yet because it only happened once, but I am locked in whatever gear that was just in. So my guess is probably second or third. So if I go to floor it now, it's not going to do anything because it's in limp mode. Again, the car's not letting me sit. This car's not ever letting, it's never let me sit. I'll be able to drive this up here, shut the car off, restart the car, and it'll be just fine, and I'll be able to drive the thing back home. And it doesn't matter what gear it's in, it's when it doesn't detect that wheel speed. That's what's going on. There's two different speeds that the transmission wants to check. Well, actually there's several, and it's not getting one of those signals, and usually it's because that plate, which you'll see here in a minute when I pull it out, it's made of plastic. They go bad because plastic's in fluid, hot fluid that heats and cools and is fluid and has pressure going to it constantly. All right, so put it in park, shut it off, restart it, put it in drive, and if I drive nice and slow, if I just pull out slowly and it makes the shift easy, it's whenever the line pressure seems to be higher, so when it's trying to make a more aggressive shift. Well, now I think it's just to the point where it just screws up every time because I'm back in limp mode again. But typically it was, if I would drive this thing easy and I would baby it, it wouldn't be as bad and it would actually go. Now it seems to do it more and more. So my theory of just keep driving it, it'll get better, yeah, that theory doesn't work in this case. But yeah, it won't rev past 3,000 RPM, but that's just fine for the gear that it's in, which is more than likely probably third gear, I'd say, which is more than enough to get me home right now. So that's where we're headed, guys. And I'm gonna have the car jacked up. We're going to tear this sucker out and put a new connector plate in there. I don't know if this drain pan's gonna be big enough, but that's the excitement. Now guys, to let you in on a little secret, I don't think this was all a Chrysler problem. I know these things have issues, and I know a lot of times these things blow out when you increase your line pressures, because it's only plastic, and the higher mileage, that plastic gets brittle, and if you've heard, you know, that if you start to increase your line pressure, it'll blow out. But I also heard if you don't properly fill these transmissions, that can also lead to the failure that I'm having. And I kinda, last time I serviced the transmission fluid on this, as I replaced the O-rings for the connector, plugs this in, I I overfilled this by probably 2 quarts of oil or trans fluid, and like I said, I heard that these are pretty sensitive to being filled too much with fluid, so I may have caused this issue myself. So I can't 100% say that this is a Chrysler thing. But yes, my pan is not big enough. All right, so we're gonna let this thing bleed, and I'm gonna continue to remove bolts and take this pan off. All right, so the pan is off, and it looks like I just have to remove 9 bolts, and then this whole assembly, this whole valve body assembly will come out. So there's 5 bolts on this side, and I believe another 4 bolts on the back side there, on the valve body back there. And then I believe this whole assembly will drop out. I also have to unbolt the connector, because there's a bolt that holds that connector in up top there. Yeah, I think I have to unbolt that, and then once I take those 9 bolts out, it might be more than that, I'm not 100% sure. I might have to take this part off, but we're gonna find that out here in about 2 seconds. So I'm gonna get busy taking this plug off, and then gonna try and take this valve body off, and we'll see how that goes. Alrighty, valve body is out now, guys. As you can see, she's just bleeding there. I made a humongous mess. It looks like all the bolts are the same length that secure the valve body to the transmission, so I'm not too concerned about where those bolts go. Same thing with the bolts that hold the drain pan on. So I'm going to take the drain pan out. I'm going to check the magnet, make sure that there's not any crazy metal in there. There hasn't been the last 2 times I've changed the fluid in here, so I don't suspect there's going to be any. And realistically, I think the only issue I'm having here is with the connector plate, but I'm going to go show you guys what that looks like, and then we're going to get busy replacing it. Hopefully we can get this all done before we run out of daylight. Here is the valve body removed, and this thing's actually a little heavier than I thought it was going to be. It's probably 10 pounds or so. That's a pretty heavy unit, but it houses all your shift solenoids and the valve body, which is a pretty big stack there. It's pretty thick. Now, we're not doing anything with the valve body. We're not rebuilding it. If I replace this connector plate and I still have the same issues, then I'm going to invest in probably an upgraded valve body for this. But again, with all the comments, all the stuff I've seen on this, this is the culprit. And in the box here, I got this from Southern Hot Rod Transmission, and this is the same connector plate that they throw in all their, high horsepower transmissions. I mean, these things are good to, 1,000, 1,500 horsepower and 1,000 foot-pounds of torque. So this connector plate's the one they use, so I bought it from them, and all I have to do now is I just have to remove, again, like I said, the solenoids, and then that should come out, and we're going to take a look at it, and we're going to see if we can figure out what actually failed on this. All right, so I don't exactly know what I'm looking at here, but I took everything apart and laid it out where it was. I put some trans gel gold on all the O-rings. They all felt nice and snug coming out, so I mean, really, when you take the stuff apart, you should be replacing the O-rings, but they all felt still pretty decent. Like I said, I mean, the honest to goodness, you know, what you should be doing with this, honestly, is rebuilding the whole thing, going through it. But again, that's expensive. I'm trying the cheap option. It's probably going to bite me because it always seems to. But yeah, everything, it looks good. There's no real buildup of any type of metal or anything like that in there. There's some screens in here. There's one there, and there's one there. I popped those screens out and they're clear on both sides. So there's no real sediment in this transmission. Like I said, I believe this thing was taken care of, and this fluid was at least changed once before I changed it. The magnet looked clear. I mean, there's a little bit of metal on it, but I mean, it's to be expected. But other than that, except for some rocks from the driveway getting in there, it still looks good. We'll pop on the new connector plate and still have a little bit of daylight left. Slap it back together. All right, so I got the fluid level pretty close. I'm gonna do a final drive on it today going to work, and then we're going to see if everything's working like it should. Had a couple little hiccups, but it was low on fluid, so couldn't get it up to temp because I couldn't drive around enough to get it up to temperature last night. So I'm hoping that driving it to work, it'll get the transmission up to a good temperature, and then that way I can just check the fluid as soon as I get there. And I brought a little bit with me just to top it up. But I got to show you that it turned into an absolute crime scene last night. So if you look here, I spilled a lot of transmission fluid. So over here I was storing, I had the bottle with the funnel on it, and every time I went to check it, I would kick the bottle over and I would spill fluid in every single direction. So definitely need to get some speedy dry and try and absorb some of this stuff in the driveway. But it was a nightmare situation yesterday. I just kept spilling transmission fluid everywhere. But that's how it goes sometimes, especially with me. I make messes everywhere. So, oh well. I'm gonna set us up in here and we're gonna see how she works. I did figure out how to check my trans temp. I just looked it up. So we're going to check the transmission temp. We're at 123 degrees right now. We're just going to set off and we're going to see what happens. It ran good. It ran good yesterday. I didn't have any hiccups except for, you know, just being low on fluid. But it seemed to shift okay, and it was working just fine yesterday. So we'll see if all of that still remains for today. All right, now last time, if you remember, when I pulled out and it immediately went into limp mode. And right now, we're not doing too bad. It's shifting like it should. Feels nice. Trans temp went down to like 95 degrees, so got some fluid moving through the old cooler there. But so far so good. I mean, at this point right now, it would have gone into limp mode already, so that already we're at least 75% better. So we'll see how the rest of the journey goes. Alright guys, good old-fashioned in the car driving at what everybody thinks is high speeds, but I assure you I'm just doing the speed limit. But I just got off here at my exit and I'm going to try a full throttle acceleration pull. And before, it wasn't even possible to go half throttle. I drove to work and home from work and I haven't had any issues. Transmission's been shifting fine. I'm sitting right at about 165 degrees of trans temp, and it's a 95 degree day out today, so it's a pretty hot day. Everything's pretty warm. So I'm just going to come down here and merge onto the road. I'm not going to get crazy and accelerate hard. I'm just going to accelerate through 1 or 2 gears and we'll see if we'll see what happens. We'll see if it goes into limp mode or not. I'm just going to kind of let the car do its thing as far as the car's shifting is concerned. So I'll just hit it here and floor it and see what she does. Brakes, and you probably could pick that up on the camera. So that is going to be in my very near future for this car, is a set of brakes. But shifting wise, right on point, just like it was before. This whole limp mode catastrophe, conductor plate, whatever you want to call it, went bad. But I'd call that job well done. It shifts just fine, doesn't go into limp mode anymore, like I keep repeating. But I'm just so excited that, you know, it was just that simple a fix, and now we're back into it. So awesome. Yeah, everything's been looking good so far on her. I'm pleased. I think job well done. All right, so I'm pretty satisfied with the car at this point. Transmission issue is fixed in my opinion. Did a couple more pulls just to make sure everything was shifting right. I'll have to do one final transmission fluid check at some point, but I'm going to keep driving the car and make sure that everything's working on it. There are a few more items that I do need to get done. I am going to be replacing the brake rotors and pads because they are just warped, and I'm just tired of dealing with them shaking. I also am going to throw a new tie rod end on because that's bad. And I got a couple other little goodies that I want to throw on the car before I get it down to the racetrack, which is in about 3 or 4 days from me making this video. So I got a little bit of work that needs to be done yet, and should be able to get it all done before I go racing this coming Saturday, but we'll just have to wait and see. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. It wasn't so much of a how-to, it was just getting it done. The job isn't that difficult, and if people want to know a little bit more about what I did, I mean, honestly, I could probably show you about 3 or 4 links to other videos of people doing the exact same thing that I just did in there. But it cleared that code, so I'm happy as can be about that. But we'll see you in the next video, which shouldn't be too long from now. Like I said, we're going to be throwing brakes on it and getting it ready to go racing. So stay tuned, guys. I'll keep plugging away at her.